Okay, thank you. We're here, we're back from our summer break, and it's Tuesday, September 19. And our first item is just an update from Chappaqua Crossing East Village. This is an update regarding the completion date of the Sawmill River Parkway and Roaring Brook intersection improvements, including the traffic signal and turning lanes. We last heard this on July 18th, so we had looked at this, we had granted the applicant some additional building permits and COs over the summer. We hope you haven't bumped up against that limit, but in any event, we're looking to get an update to see where we are and what the next step might be. So if the applicant could fill us in on it, would be appreciated. We suggest that your summer report will be more interesting than ours.
We hear about our summer vacations as well.
That's exactly right.
That's right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, my name is David Cooper, a partner with the law firm of Sarin and Steinmetz, here representing Toll Brothers, the residential developer at Chappaqua Crossing East Village. With me is Greg Otis on Zoom as well from Toll Brothers, the senior land development manager and project manager on this one. With respect to an update, we can tell you that Toll is continuing to push Summit Development to complete the work. Our understanding is that as of today, Verdi, their electrical contractor, has completed the electrical work. There are a couple of outstanding items that are required in order to close out the permit. One is the DOT has requested a minor change in the signal light, and Summit Development is reporting to us that they're going to undertake that update or that change next week. Also, road striping still needs to occur. I believe that is scheduled for the following week. And then overhead signal testing and signal cabinet testing, which would occur at the end of September and in October. So hopefully by mid-October, the permit would be closed out. What we can also tell you from Toll Brothers, and obviously we had a discussion when we met with you in July, is our hands are a little bit tied because we're not a permittee on this permit, but they are holding a somewhat large sum of money in escrow pending the closure of this permit. So rest assured, we're trying the best we can to push this on our end as well.
Right. So I had heard earlier that the ETA might be somewhere closer to the early part of October, but do you think by mid-October you should be all set?
I hope so. I'll leave it to Greg. I don't want to get everyone's hopes up and then you tell me push it a little further. So go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, staff. Yes, we believe that it's right around the October 7th to 9th range for the DOT and MTA to complete their signal switchover. And then, as David mentioned, the remaining work after the signal switchover would consist of the final road striping work, weather pending. So we think that, by, I'm just going to say, middle of October, all the work is completed. The final certification letters should be submitted to the DOT, at which time they'll begin their review to close out the permit. So we're, as David mentioned, we continue to push Dave Walsh, SG Summit, and we're really hoping to have this wrapped up as much as the town would like this wrapped up. And so we think that this is good news to report back to the board. And we appreciate your assistance, in coordinating this as well with us. Appreciate it.
Great. So where are you right now in terms of building permits and COs?
In terms of
Trying to find the sheet in here. It's just a pile of stuff that we have
Yeah.
numbers.
I apologize. I'm gonna try to just estimate. But I think on the building permit side, we're getting close to the upper 30 mark right now on the building permits. And in terms of COs, Bob, do you have a better handle on the COs? It could be, I think it's in almost the 20 yard, 15 to 20.
I think that's a good estimate. I think that's a good estimate, yes.
Yeah.
Is that a new protractor there, Bob?
That's one of the building permits.
And on the Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good estimate, Greg, I agree.
So I think we had granted 63 building permits, 45 COs, not in any way to be punitive. If that's enough until we see you again in October, maybe our second meeting in October, because the first one looks like it'll be postponed, canceled,
The 19th.
19th.
17th.
If you need any more, I mean, certainly
17th.
17th, it'll be October 17th. If you need more, we don't wanna hold you up. By the same token, we feel as though, I guess based on the phone traffic that the town receives about people upset about this thing not coming to a conclusion, I think it's appropriate that we hold some back, but not in any way to hold you guys back from, the construction that you have underway. It doesn't seem like it looks like we were pretty generous with the number so that you're in good shape. So this is not meant to be punitive to Toll Brothers and your activities. It's really
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
it's really I think it's more about the optics, that we look like we're earning our pay here.
Well, and how long is the agenda gonna be on that second meeting?
We don't know
If
at
it's
this
close to this one, we're happy to come back.
No, we could put you in the front of the agenda.
Oh, okay, then that would be appreciated.
Yep, you'd have to sit back for cupcakes again or something, but otherwise we're okay. So if that's fair, I mean, do you need anything more from us at this point? It sounds like you guys are making great progress, so that the DOT is finally making some good progress and we're moving forward, and this thing is it sounds like it'll be closed out, and this is great. Hopefully by the 17th, is it? Did you say? This next meeting?
What?
By the 17th, you'll be all set and closed.
By the 7th, October
Yeah.
7th.
Yeah, I think the work complete, the new signal is operational by the middle of October there.
Yep.
And then we'll work with Dave Walsh's group to formally close the permit.
Okay.
So at this time, I think from our side, Toll Brothers, we have everything that we need at this time, and we appreciate the everything from the town side as well. Thank you.
Okay, good. So we'll see you next month.
All right, sounds
Okay.
good.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our next items are minutes. So we have, this is the first time I've ever seen where the resolutions are actually finished and done with the minutes. I never knew they were so long. Anyway, so we have minutes from June 21. Does anyone have any questions or issues on the minutes, June 21? No. If not, Dick, are you okay with that?
He sent me changes.
Okay, good, all right. So,
Alicia,
Yes,
you got my note, right?
I did, thank you.
great, so subject to those relatively minor changes, is there a motion to adopt the minutes of June 21?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And we have the minutes from July 18.
Same, there's a change.
Yeah, I think I had one or two that I'll just scan over to you, it's very tiny. So with those minor amendments, is there a motion to adopt the minutes of July 18?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. We have a discussion item that was added here. Apparently the seeker is underway, and maybe Sabrina and Jennifer, if you would just give us a little update, where we are on the seeker and what role, if anything, the planning board has in this, and where we go from here. My understanding is we've had some discussion on this. is that the planning board is an interested agency in this project. Well, whatever, this petition, which includes secret review. So there's nothing more that we need to do that, but perhaps it would be important to understand what that really means. And then the next step is what the planning board does or wants to do in terms of weighing in as an interested agency.
Yes, I'll let Sabrina chime in as far as what the current status is before the town board,
Sure.
because she's been more involved on that end than I have, but my understanding is that they are in the process of reviewing a draft negative declaration, so finding that there's no significant adverse environmental impact for the proposed action being the legislation, the proposed legislation. In reviewing that proposed legislation, because it obviously involves a project specific to that legislation, they have been reviewing the impacts of that project as part of the secret review of the legislation. So that's all part of the proposed action that they're reviewing. The town board is the lead agency. They did circulate a notice of intent. Gosh, it was sometime late last year. I think we
It was
discussed
in
it.
July of 2022.
Oh, thank you. Wow, it was earlier than I thought.
Yeah, so if I may, Jen, just as far as current status, the town board had a work session on 9/5 to walk through the draft negative declaration, which I circulated to your board this afternoon. The public hearing has been closed with the acceptance of written comments up to October 2nd. I think it was at 12 noon or close of business, they're willing to accept written comments. So the town board is feeling pretty comfortable with the negative declaration at the moment, and they will be considering draft resolutions of approval for both acceptance of the neg deck as well as adoption of the legislation. So that's the current status of the project. As Jen indicated, the planning board was listed as an interested agency in lead agency notice circulation that was distributed in June 2022. If you recall early conversations that your board had, you had seeker comments as well as project comments and legislative comments. So you opined on those matters, given your role as an interested agency as well as an agency that is referred legislative amendments by the town board.
So I don't know where I was before, but
Very good.
It's okay. The town board, yeah, as Sabrina mentioned, serving as lead agency or an interested agency, you have the opportunity to comment, which you have. You still have the opportunity to comment. The town board has not, adopted a secret determination yet, so you still have the opportunity. A draft is available. You can review that and comment as you wish.
So is that draft available online, I guess?
I believe it is, yes. Sabrina circulated to the board earlier today a link to the town board packet from September 5th, where it is available to the public.
So, I'm sorry, I looked for it on the town website and couldn't find it in the posting for this project where all the documentation is there, and I looked for it, it was this morning or yesterday afternoon. And the most recent one I could find was the August 3rd, I think, yes, and that did not include a lot of the material that Sabrina and whoever has now put into the actual EAF and draft EAF. And so I looked for it again, and we got an email, I think, from Sabrina this afternoon giving us the link to access to town board materials. But but I don't, is this document available to the public on the town
Yes.
website?
Yeah, so instead of looking at the project site, and Sabrina, maybe the project site should be updated to include this draft, but if you look at the town board agenda packet, similar to like how you look at your packets on E-codes on the town board agenda site, similar to that, the town board also provides all of its documents.
So I was looking at the wrong place.
September 5th
Thank you.
meeting
Okay.
packet, it's in
Yeah,
there.
well, I just found that email before I came to this meeting about half hour ago.
Yeah.
So we I guess I haven't had a chance to look at this material, the latest draft, and I know that we made comments back before when must have been back in February, I think, maybe it was March.
Sounds about
We
right.
made comments to the project as it stood then. And there actually was not an EIS document of any kind at that point in time. We were just raising questions with regard to SECRA at that point in time.
Right, the town board was still in an information collecting
Correct.
stage, right?
And we
Right
just
now they
wanted,
have a draft determination.
right, and we wanted to raise some red flags, what our concerns were, where this might be a question, these questions that might end up needing to be addressed in SECRA
Right.
that relates back to the actual project. So now we actually have an EAF, now we actually have a draft document. And the way I understand it, we now have, Sabrina, we have until the 2nd of October to respond? Is that-
Yes, Tom, let me just clarify, it's not an EAF. Okay, the EAF stands for Environmental Assessment Form. What you have for review right now is a draft environmental determination.
Okay,
Okay, and just making that distinction because different acronyms in the environmental arena mean different things.
sure.
You have, the town board has closed the public hearing and you are able to submit written comments until October 2nd at noon.
So what is a determination under all these categories of EAF, type 1, coordinated review, uncoordinated review,
No, it has been a coordinated review.
yes?
It has been a coordinated review. The town board is lead agency. The planning board was listed as an interested agency.
Right,
As part of the secret process, the town board has been asking for different information. The applicant has been submitting information. All of that information has been submitted and the town board asked for a draft negative declaration or a draft determination of no significant adverse environmental impact. That is the document that you have before you. So all of the information that the town board has received, comments from your board, comments from the fire department, comments from the public, commingled with information submitted by the applicant that has been provided as part of this application process, have all been examined and incorporated into the negative declaration, the draft negative declaration that the town board is currently considering and potentially amending.
so just, cause I quite frankly forget where this all began in detail, but it's a coordinated review for a type 1,
Unlisted.
unlisted, thank you,
It
unlisted,
is an unlisted action.
got it, thank you.
And just so you're aware, secret doesn't require that legislative decisions go through the secret process. Many times they are just type 2 actions due to the extent of this application. And if you recall in the beginning, it was intended that the application for the legislation along with the site plan were to proceed along the same path at the same time. The town board classified this as an unlisted action. We no longer have a site plan application tied to this action. It is solely adoption of the legislation. And the town board is interested in attaching the concept plans to the legislation.
Well, yeah, and I think my understanding of the local law is that the reason I think that the town board wisely segregated the so-called application from the legislation is that until there is a change in the zoning law, it is the planning board that would have jurisdiction over an application. in the hamlet. So that was effectively
Very clever.
cleverly moved around us. I'll leave it to others as to whether or not people think that's good government or not, but that's in effect is what happened here is, and so even now, we speak in terms of the seeker review, it's a seeker review on the legislation, the petition. But it's really not a seeker review on the application, there is no application for an
Correct.
actual action. So there really is, there cannot really be yet a seeker review for the actual proposed action.
There is though,
How
it
can
is
there be?
being reviewed on a conceptual level,
I understand, but
so
really
things
should
as-
it be until the legislation is approved? Can you,
You
or should
can
it?
and you should. So whenever you have zoning legislation that really impacts, a very discrete amount of projects or a discrete amount of properties, you should be reviewing the impacts of the development of those properties
So-
with the legislation in order to avoid segmentation. That doesn't have to get down into the very nitty gritty
right.
details of, site specific issues, but on a conceptual level so that if and when they come back with an actual application, a land use application for the development of a project on that property, any impacts, secret impacts that fall within that box of what was already studied won't need to be studied again, but anything that falls outside of that would be subject to additional review.
Right, and that was also the way we went about, until it was truncated, the form-based code. But that was different because it was an area.
It
And
was much
this is-
different, yeah,
Much different.
very different,
This is a parcel.
yes.
So it's, I know it sounds like we're dancing on the head of a pin, but other folks have done that and that's what's happened in this case. So it's interesting to me. I'm uncomfortable with it. I understand with it, and I agree with you. Obviously, this is what you should be doing, and we argued from the get-go that the site plan should be looked at in detail at this time. And yet it seems like it has been segmented, and then after the fact, we'll just attach this. And once the legislation's in place, then we effectively have bypassed what we have now in our law in terms of the review. And of course, the proposed law is actually, I think he leaves the site plan review with the town board as well, which is fine, that's what they wanna do, they have, that's up to them. Whether or not it's the right thing to do is something else, I have opinions on that, but I'm still uncomfortable that there is this, that we're operating, that we are actually doing a seeker review on this application, on this project. And we're not. I mean, I know we're calling it that, but we're really not because we don't have an application.
Yeah,
So
it's-
there's a lot of shadows and things going on here that are perfectly, I suppose, legal, but highly irregular from what we've done in this town. And I've been doing this a long time, so I've never seen this done before. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I concur. One of the, it's unfortunate that it's unlisted and it has been determined that it's an unlisted action. And unless I'm mistaken, Jennifer, because it's an unlisted action, the usual protocols for a type 1 declaration of a project whereby you, in a full EIS, one would need to actually provide some alternatives, for example.
So just because it's a type 1 action doesn't mean you're doing an EIS. That's not a direct one-to-one correlation.
Okay,
You can have neg decks with type 1 actions and we see it all the time all over the place and
yes, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
yeah, but the only thing, no, they use the full environment, no, I mean, any process that would be applicable to a type 1 action up until this point has been followed with respect to the unlisted action. And we don't have discretion to determine whether it's type 1 or unlisted or type 2. It is what it is, it either falls within the list in SECRA
Understood.
or it doesn't, so
Yep.
this was properly classified as unlisted because it doesn't meet any of those type 1 thresholds.
Understood.
I can confirm that.
And I don't think I disagree with where the town board's going on a neg deck. I think that probably is the right conclusion. But again, we've talked about this, all of us have talked about this at one point or another, is that it's a very odd process that we have followed to get to this stage. And what happens is when you start out with an odd process, you end up with something that is different from what maybe
So
we
though,
should have been looking at.
so though it's, a project would not require a full EIS, as this one, we're declaring that this one does not require a full EIS. It nonetheless goes through the process to determine whether it's a negative or positive declaration.
Correct, yes.
And in the negative and positive declaration decision,
Yeah.
there is what's, I think the term of art might be the term of law, is that one needs to actually take what's known as a hard look
Correct.
at the elements which are in the scope of items that are going to be looked at in the process of determining whether it's a positive or negative.
So, right, a hard look is taken with respect to all of the relevant environmental impacts, all of the possible relevant environmental impacts. Use the word scope, which actually is a term of art in SECRA, and that would come after a positive declaration, so after finding that there may be one or more significant adverse environmental impacts. Then you get to a scoping document, which is the table of contents for your environmental impact statement, but that's not happening here because we have a draft negative declaration. So
Got
the
it.
town board took a hard look at all the relevant impacts and they've asked that a document be prepared, finding that there's no significant adverse environmental impacts.
I incorrectly used the word scope. What I really intended to address were the elements that are looked at within the analysis of whether it's a positive or negative, significant impacts.
Right, I didn't think you were using it in the secret term, but
Yeah.
I wanted to make
The
sure
term
that
of
we're
art
all on the
term,
same
which
page
is-
there.
Yeah, sorry. So at some point, those elements are determined by who?
It's a combination of the town board and its staff and its professional consultants. It's a review of all of the information in the record before it. The part one of the EAF, which gives all of the nitty-gritty details about the proposed action that they're looking at. All of the professional studies, the plans, the legislation itself, mapping, all of the information that's before the board. The board looks at that, it receives input from its involved and interested agencies,
Public?
staff, consultants, public, absolutely. And it's a combination of all of those things, but ultimately it's up to the board to determine, okay, what do we think the relevant impacts are here? Obviously, if we're talking about 50 North Greeley, I don't believe there are steep slopes on the property, right? So steep slopes, we put that aside, that's obviously not a relevant environmental impact here. So they really just try to focus on the relevant ones.
If I may, SECR also has roughly 18 categories that all of the information falls within, 18 or 19 categories that we kind of take each one of those and you'll see the draft negative declaration is associated with one of those categories. And it speaks to impacts within each of those 18 categories, whether or not they exist, how they're treated, and whether or not there is an impact.
So those are the same categories that, under a different circumstance, go into a scoping decision. They're the same categories that one addresses?
They're in the environmental assessment forms, yes, so regardless, any project that walks through the secret process is examined under those 18 categories. Land, water, groundwater,
Transportation.
vegetation, community character, comprehensive plans, socioeconomics, yes, health and safety.
So it's a checklist it's a standard checklist that is always used.
Correct.
Always,
In fact,
yes.
you have to use it, that's
And we expand on that, we look at socioeconomics, we look at school capacity, Those are requests of the town board, to look at that specificity in certain areas.
So, the part of this that, I mean, I think the day is long past on this, but the part of it that I was always uncomfortable with was the notion that actually we are attaching an actual project proposal to this zoning legislation action. And I thought that it would be better to separate those entirely and to identify what would be just a normal, typical zoning sort of legislation that has to do with, what's the policy here? Do we want 4 stories or 3 stories? What are some basic things that zoning normally would address in the interest of manifesting the comprehensive plan and some notions about what this neighborhood, I'm gonna call it neighborhood, it's not a neighborhood, but it certainly could be, what this part of town could actually become as a policy matter. And I have always been very, very uncomfortable with actually a actual development proposal leading this process. I mean, that's what's happening here. It's the development proposals itself, it's the developer. It seems to be, to me, the aggressive posture within the town's policy framework, an aggressive posture driving, I think, driving it past a point of discussion about what that policy, what the policy actually is and how it could be represented, how it could be put into zoning.
Yep.
And then we could end up with a different, perhaps, maybe not, but a different application one day. And that's the way zoning is usually done. I understand the special permit thing, I get how that works. If this were a church, if this were a hospital, if this were something which actually was a special permit which had an institutional purpose, a public purpose, specific to a rare instance, specific to a particular need, then I could see taking those two, the application and the zoning issue, the zoning initiative, and bundling it together and saying, we're gonna do this here. This to me is different. This to me is this is a developer's initiative. And I just think it's been handled incorrectly, and my fear is it's gonna be to the disbenefit ultimately. And I said this, I'm not saying this for the first time, I've said it many times. So my question now is, in the review of where we are right now and our status as an interested agency, the town board didn't have to actually hear public comments, unless I'm mistaken.
On the local law, they were required to have a public hearing.
I'm talking about the
On SECRA, there's no public hearing that would have been required at this point. It's
SECRA.
encouraged, but not required.
And so they, since no public hearing or public comments are actually required on the SECRA, they have the discretion to decide on October 2nd that that's actually the day. There is no specific time period they have to leave this comment period open according to SECRA regulations.
No, but they have had a public hearing. It's been on the local law, but I haven't listened to the public hearing comments, but I have to imagine that there were some comments related to SECRA voiced during the public hearing. So they're pulling in information related to SECRA, even though the public hearing isn't specifically on SECRA, it's on the legislation, but they're still pulling in information that's relevant to their SECRA determination.
So they would be hearing comments up until the 2nd, and then on the 3rd, Sabrina, I guess on the 3rd, having those comments available to them in their public meeting to then determine whether they need to make adjustments to the whole thing or parts of the thing, or they just go ahead and just vote it in.
Yes, comments are due on the 2nd, the town board is meeting on October 3rd, and they have 2 paths ahead of them. They either adopt the resolutions or they hold off until they, make changes.
And again, to be clear, the public hearing was closed. They were not obligated to extend this written period, but the tradition in this town is we always do that. And there was some discussion as to how long they would do that, but they were not obligated to do that, but they did do it. And I think they extended it for 3 weeks, which was, I thought pretty generous.
So,
To get comments in.
leaves it now up to what do we do as an interested agency? What's our feeling about our?
Well, I know it's been represented that we have already made comments on SECR during this process. I don't recall that. We talked about that this morning. I don't recall specifically that we ever made comments on SECR, and the reason for that is we never had any data to that secret information that we would actually comment on. We certainly did talk about the site plan, we talked about legislation, of course, but I don't recall ever doing anything on SECR itself. So, we don't meet again until after this public hearing, so I don't know if there's interest in having a special meeting so that you put together a memo. I haven't even seen this email that Sabrina sent this afternoon, so I haven't seen the document. I have, again, I suspect that a neg deck is probably in order when you go through the 18 pieces, maybe not. But nonetheless, there still could be comments, yay or nay, or just changes that we think are important. And then we have that, I think we have that obligation to weigh in if we feel that we should.
Can I just understand, just process-wise, if as it stands now, the comment period is open till October 2nd, town board plan or has a meeting on October 3rd, they could theoretically, and it sounds like maybe this was their intention, but they could theoretically pass the zoning legislation on October 3rd, correct?
Okay, yes.
And then there would be legislation for 50 North Greeley that allows any number of then as of right developments, and we could then expect an application to quickly follow suit, presumably from the applicant here for development of the site. And because the legislation was drafted as it was, that would go to the town board. The planning board would have no jurisdiction, no longer meet or discuss it, even though we're no longer an interested agency at that point. We're an interested agency as it pertains to the zoning legislation, but not to an application.
Sure, I think you still could be classified as an interested agency.
Unless I'm mistaken,
On an application?
If you literally have an interest in the application,
But it's
if you
not a
have an
secret.
interest in commenting, you can request to be listed as an interested agency.
There would not be a secret
secret action is over,
on
so it's not a
on
secret. It's
Not
not a secret.
necessarily,
I'm sorry,
not necessarily.
oh, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, once an application comes in pursuant to that legislation, there would need to be a review done by whoever the lead agency is gonna be to make sure that it still falls
Complicit
within,
with the
remember that
legislation.
box of
Yeah,
what was
I
studied
see.
previously.
I
If all
see.
of a sudden there's a change.
Within the
then it's-
non-scope scope.
Yeah, right, right.
So,
There still needs to be some amount of review done, for sure.
so there is potentially a secret review position for the planning board down the road on this, potentially.
Well, only
There-
if there's a material change, right? And only if there's a
Correct.
referral? I don't see any secret review with us at all.
No, I think that there is an opportunity that's written into the legislation for a referral to the planning board.
That's where I was going,
Okay.
but it's not a
And that
secret.
is,
It's
it is not
a
secret, it is review of the application, the special permit application.
But
Yeah.
that's even more of a reason why, to the extent there is a review of under SECR to make sure that there aren't any impacts that go beyond what was already studied. Because you have a referral, you're acting in an advisory capacity to the approval authority. That absolutely qualifies you as an interested agency,
Interested agency,
not
but not an
involved
involved
because you
agency.
don't have an approval over
Right.
any aspect of the project. But it's certainly an interested agency.
Right. I
I should have brought Tom had the benefit of hearing me.
She was
I don't know
great,
if
by
it was
the
a
way.
benefit, but Tom came to the New York Planning Federation
This is what it-
conference last week, so
This is what it-
I should have brought my PowerPoint. We could have gone through
You were just
the
going
whole
up for the
secret
CIA.
process.
I went up to Hyde Park, there was a
He's a
state,
glutton for punishment, I guess.
no, a state planning thing for getting some there's this, so Jennifer was giving a lecture on this particular subject, not this project,
No,
but this
but
subject.
secret in general.
And she talked brilliantly for an hour. And what I learned was that if I just kept quiet, I could learn a lot from you. Instead
All
of
these
interrupting
years.
you all the time.
All these years.
I apologize. She was brilliant. So thank you for the lecture, it was really, of course, I came back
Glad it
not
was
learning
helpful.
anything, cause I have all these questions again. So I understand that we do have a referral position. They can refer, or I think last version I think that they have to refer it to us.
I thought it was discretionary.
Haven't looked at it
Discretionary,
recently.
okay, discretionary. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know why, I would even look at it, because we've already talked about this and made our comments, and I mean, it's up to others on the board to decide whether they would wanna take it up on referral, but I have no interest in doing that. Because we've already said what I've already said what I think needs to be said about this, and there's no point in, going through that all over again to no purpose. So I am interested in taking this point in time because I'm not certain that I skimmed it before I came, the latest version of it that I picked up off of the website for the link that Sabrina sent of the document, the secret document. And I'm not sure that there really is in certain areas, I'm not sure that the hard look has actually been done. And so I think that from my perspective, I think that there are some questions that probably could be asked about certain parts of this to be sure that the hard look has been properly done on it. And so I was either can do this just as a interested party as a citizen, or have it part of a planning board response as an interested agency. And what I would suggest in the second instance is that we only have a couple of weeks, and I don't think that there's necessarily time to go through this whole document. Maybe there is, and come to some consensus on it and
Right.
put together the consensus is part of the discussion back and forth. Before, we have had documents that we have sent, memos we've sent to the town board, which are not necessarily consensus documents in every case, but statements and observations by individual members that are just assembled in one memo that comes from the planning board to the town board, and the town board then is free to do with it what they will. I imagine we are going to have differences of opinion on some of these things, I can see it coming. But I don't think that ought to get in the way of us putting our individual best efforts forward as planning board members in the context of the planning board.
I guess we could do that, I mean, as long as we let the town board know that it's not an official consensus document. That could make some sense, cause I don't think, frankly, we have sufficient time if we wanna weigh in on the secret review between now and October 2nd. We'd have to have a special meeting and we'd have to get together, and that is difficult, just doing that, finding time. And then it's difficult to kind of assemble it. I think actually most of our memos have been, and that's why it's been a little bit painstaking, is that they have been, for the most part, consensus ones. We've had actually some specific other statements. I think Eldad had one time, I think Kanan had one time, which was, I thought was highly appropriate and the right thing to do, so that the town board knew, we're not 100% congruent, and we have different thoughts, and if they want 100% congruency, they shouldn't want that. So we could try that if people, we could just put together a package and say, here are 5 letters or memos from members of concerned members of the board who agree or disagree on various subjects. We could try that. If that's just too cumbersome, then I guess we just resort to the just individual notes.
Can citizens, can citizens produce documents also?
Yes, and I wanted to say that you shouldn't confuse whether or not it's coming from the planning board, because in order for a memo to come from the planning board, it has to be resolved at your meeting.
Right.
Or at a meeting with a quorum, so that, let's make the distinction, right? If it is a memo of the planning board, whether it represents one opinion or 5 different opinions, there's a formality attached to it that I'm not certain you have the time
Right.
to meet that deadline. But any individual member of the planning board can submit written comments as an individual to the town board.
And the other, and the other item that came up during the discussion about the extension for the written period was there was, I think, genuine interest in making certain that as much information came in during those 2 or 3 weeks. And the town board members spoke to the fact that they will look at all of this, and if they felt that changes had to be made to the documents, whichever documents they're, that Sabrina's working on, I did not necessarily get the feeling that October 3rd was gonna be the day that they would take action. That was the first day that they would meet as a group and start to look at all the information, start to sort through it all and sort through the documents. But I would be very surprised if they actually took action that evening. They might, but I think they were quite serious in wanting to make sure that they heard things, and there was a lot of opinion that they would make changes if appropriate. And I think they're sort of obligated to do that. That's what the public hearing process is.
Well, so
And as your board knows, having gone through this process many times, if the public waits until the deadline to submit volumes of information, that information needs to be reviewed before I, as a professional, can advise the town board to move forward.
I have a question that I remember a long time ago when we started some of this. I had a concern about the pilings that were going to be put in the ground to make this building safe. Now, it's still a gooey place. There are 150 piles probably somewhere in that range for that little building that's there. That could be a real killer to them if they haven't really done a serious study, for instance, before this thing gets to the end. That could kill the project because the weight of this building is going to be more than the weight of the possible building the existing building that is there. And I think that's like a significant thing. Would that be something that that I could submit or something? Serious problem, because it's I doubt very much that the piles go to rock. They're friction probably oriented.
And you can absolutely submit that comment, Dick. It is completely appropriate for you to submit that comment. That is not a new comment that the town board has heard.
I think that's a good example.
I haven't heard anybody say it's okay.
That's a good example of what?
And unfortunately, because of the nature of the conceptual plans that we have, we don't know if it's okay, we'll not know if it's okay until they get into the site plan application phase.
Right,
And that's potentially even the building phase.
that was my point before about conceptual versus
Specific?
site specific. That's the kind of thing we wouldn't expect until the legislation's in place and they know they can go forward. We wouldn't expect a property owner to outlay that money to do those very intensive studies to find that data out until they get the legislation in place and go to that site specific review. And that's why I think there will have to be some level of environmental review done at at the application stage, because there's certain things that we don't know right now. And that's okay that we don't know them, because there's legislation being put in place, not a project approval. This project, as it's proposed, might change as a result of this information. Like what Dick just mentioned. There's probably other pieces of information that we don't have that we'll know once we get to that site-specific review stage.
So you're
And
suggesting,
that's completely legitimate and legal and normal procedure.
so in Dick's instance, if I'm correct, actually this may not be, I'm not sure that that's an environmental problem, because you can engineer anything. It's rather a problem that it may not be feasible for them to build the building, and that would change the nature of the project, and build a building in this particular way.
Yeah.
And that would change the nature of the application.
It could.
And that change in the project may fall outside of what was reviewed under the seeker analysis. Or even fall outside what is required per the special permit.
That's why, to your earlier point too, you want the legislation, not just, of course, it's kind of like, dovetailing with this project, but you also want it to stand on its own in case this project changes or becomes something different. You wanna make sure that the legislation that you have stands on its own as well.
Right,
And
right.
it's something that you're comfortable with.
Okay,
Yeah, we've spoken to that.
there's a
Yeah,
whole
I
other,
mean, we've talked about
there's
this.
a whole other side to this that is fruitless to pursue, so, in my opinion. So we have to decide, I guess, how we want to proceed. I know that I will be having comments that I would like to get to the town board on the secret stuff.
Yep.
The hard look on a couple of elements which I think have not been done. And I think it would be better if we could have a document that came from the planning board, the premature of the planning board, rather than just Tom Curley as a citizen. But I don't know whether the rest of us have the appetite to go through that process of what that would look like.
But it
No.
sounds like it's not even so much the appetite, so much as we would need to request that the town board extend or delay their timeline, no?
Well, or we have a special meeting and get it done in time.
Yeah, and
That's the appetite part, that's part of the appetite
Right.
part.
and we have to obviously find a place, time where everyone can make it for that special meeting, and it would probably take a fair amount of time to grind it out. I suspect, I did watch the session, so I suspect that there's very little appetite to extend the written material time. It was quite a debate going back and forth. It really got down to one more weekend versus not having a weekend. So it was between 2.5 weeks and 3 weeks, and almost silly, frankly. And but I think there is, it was a split vote, but there was a sense that from the majority that we've seen this enough. We've heard it all. And it's
But they haven't.
well, that's up to those folks who are gonna be writing between now and October 2nd.
Exactly,
So that's the key.
and that's what I'm talking about.
Yes, and I agree, but I think Sabrina raises a very good point in terms of the logistics of getting it done. I'm willing to do it. I would make myself available, and I think it's important to do. I don't know, Kanan's not here. I don't know, Eldad, what your schedule is. Dick, I don't know what your schedule is, but I'm fine with it. I don't know if we have to necessarily tie up staff to be here with us.
You do.
You might,
If it's a
okay.
board matter, you will need staff, we will need to notice it, we will need.
Yep.
How much notice does it need? I mean,
Well, what, 3 or 4 days, 5 days, something like that?
Felicia, you publish, how much time do you need?
We only publish for public hearings, is that what this would be?
No, we could just post it on the website, we need to give it a couple days.
Yeah.
There's a
So we've done that before when we've had to do approvals to tell people out. So we did in pretty short notice, 2 or 3 days at most. So we could do, if there's an appetite, we can certainly try it. I personally think it could be important. I haven't looked at the document, so I really couldn't say for sure.
does the quorum need to be in person for something like that, since it's not a hearing?
You cannot, it's not a meeting unless you're in person.
At least 3 are in person, yeah.
Yes. I actually do just wanna kind of say that if it is individual as opposed to a board memo, to me, as staff who reviews this, it comes as equal weight, right? Having it written as and sent as the planning board with different opinions or individually, it carries the same weight to my eyes in the sense that I'm staff that is reviewing all of this, determining whether or not the information is valid and presenting it to the town board for consideration.
So, with all due respect, I'm not writing any of this for your eyes. I'm writing it as a member of the planning board for the town board. There is a larger, there is a larger responsibility here, in my opinion, of the planning board to report to the town board. I understand that you need to go through your technical analysis of whatever you get, and in that regard, your technical analysis doesn't mediate between a board and it's a technical analysis and an individual citizen. I understand that. But that's not the issue here. I would expect you to do that. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about what I see as being a responsibility of the planning board to weigh in on an environmental action on this legislation. And I think that that's one of the things we're here to do. So that's my opinion. And that it would be sent under that responsibility and hopefully received by the town board as a planning board document, which should carry more weight than an individual person making a comments to their environmental review. I think that's what we're here. We're here to represent the town and the people in the town just as they represent the people in the town. And our specific responsibility has to do with these specific things. That's the context in which I think that this is something that I feel we're obligated to do. I don't even feel we have a choice. And if it means that, we need to ask them to give us another week, then, if they say no, well, then that's on them. It's not on us.
So I don't know if there's an obligation to make comments, but I do think there's an obligation to review the documentation to see whether, given our role, and since the negative declaration draft document was presented to us today, it's not unreasonable for us to tell the town board we'd like to review and get back to them to see if we do have comment.
Right.
I don't think that's an unreasonable request. If they don't want to extend the time, the comment period, that's on them, but I don't think it's an outrageous request of us. Just speaking personally, it'll be challenging to find time to have a special meeting now.
Right.
It's the Jewish holiday season, and time is limited, and so I cannot at this moment commit to a special meeting for us to reach consensus on something. However, I do think it's not unreasonable to want the planning board to review and potentially comment on this document. I don't think it's an outrageous request, and the timing is such that we got this document this afternoon. And that's okay, but it doesn't exactly give us sufficient time to review and potentially comment, and so and I completely agree, Tom. Yes, Sabrina, your review of any comments are afforded equal weight, as they should, but there is a different weight to the planning board reviewing and commenting on these matters because it's our role.
Well, and I agree, and my take on this is, I know folks are focusing on seeker. I still have a number of fundamental policy issues with the legislation and how the legislation came about. And those are policy issues. That's for the town board and for them to consider or not consider again or dismiss. But it's to me, those are important. The materials that we send to Sabrina are critically important if we're supplying technical things, and Bob and Dennis, and they should comment and that's fine. But I agree with you guys that my intention is to try to garner some attention on fundamental policy issues. I'm still focusing, I know people are focusing on secret because that's the latest thing that came in, but I'm still there's some issues with the proposed legislation that I think are a problem.
Oh,
And so my focus is still on the policy issues of the legislation.
But are you
itself.
suggesting we address that somehow? Because
I-
we have addressed it obviously in multiple.
In some areas, but I again, what we haven't done is, in my opinion, step back and said, let's look at the progress. Let's see how we did here. We started out, we were going to study the entire hamlet. Then we said, well, that's too tough because there's a lot of public property here and that's involved, so we gotta take that off, and we got these drawings where people are drawing these, colossal buildings on the circle around the train track, and it's on public property. It's crazy. So then we said, okay, that's too difficult, this public property. So now we're gonna take a look, we're gonna focus on North Greeley. Because that is an area that is begging for redevelopment. Everyone agreed, no problem, so we're gonna study on North Greeley. We immediately called for, let's look at parking capacity, see what we're talking about. And the next thing that we know, we're off on another track, we got the form-based code going, and we're not really looking at North Greeley anymore, we're looking at the form-based code for the entire hamlet again. Then that sinks, that goes down, and then to Tom's point, all of a sudden, we now have, with the moratorium is over, where we didn't accomplish much, if anything, during the moratorium, except fight.
Great point.
Here we are, and now we have a developer leading the charge and basically setting the table, setting the vision, setting the policy for North Greeley. And the next thing I'm hearing is that, well, okay, we're gonna start looking at the public property. It's like a little sparkly thing comes in front of us and we go trail off and look at the next sparkly thing. It's really, I've been doing this a long time, so it's really frustrating because I have participated in traffic studies and downtown studies here for over 20 years, and then to comments that I've heard from other supervisors, we don't do anything, we never get anything done. We forgot what we were supposed to be doing. We were supposed to be looking at North Greeley, and we've now, in my opinion, let a developer lead the charge on it. And I'm not saying this has nothing to do good, bad, or indifferent about the developer, the project. That just as a fundamental issue should not be going on. It should be us, we should be leading the charge. And during that moratorium, I've said this many times, I'll say it again, it's gonna be in writing. Had we done something else during the moratorium, such as saying, you know what, you wanna see development? We're gonna give you guys on North Greeley the apple, the carrot. We agree we'll upzone everyone here to 3 stories. However, as we did on South Greeley, we'll lead the charge, we'll coordinate, we're gonna set up a parking district. If we did that, then North Greeley would be developing the way we would wanna see it, it would be fantastic. And we've done it before, we did South Greeley years ago, before my time. It's doable, and yet we didn't do that. And I'm just so disappointed because we surrendered it once again to a developer. Tom, I was talking to someone, if we had not reacted to Chappaqua Crossing, we would have had 255 single home residences up there instead of what we have. So if you let a developer lead it, because they got their plan, their ideas, et cetera, that's what you could end up with. I'm not saying this is neutral in terms of the project itself. And again, that's why I'm just focusing on the zoning. But this zoning law doesn't talk in terms of what is the preferred density? What are we doing about the area in terms of stormwater management? What are we doing about the parking, obviously? All these kinds of fundamental, my God, you know zoning better than I will ever know. These are the things that go into like a generic zoning area for a vision that we still haven't formed. And we keep kicking the planning can down the road. And what happens is when you do that, there's a void and people, developers will fill the void and do what they can try to do and push the envelope. And I don't blame them, that's perfectly fine, I get it. But I am just so tired of seeing us surrender that position. And we carved it out, we were supposed to do this.
Yeah,
And it was not that big a deal. North Greeley, we said, we all said, look, it's
it's manageable.
manageable, it's calling out for a strategy, a development. It's in our hands, we can help people,
Here's the,
and here we are.
here's what I think is sort of the grand,
So that's the policy issue, the policy issues.
Right, which
But I am like, just,
I agree with many if not all of
Yep.
it, we've discussed this
Yes.
and North Greeley is
and
well
you said about the
defi-
process,
yeah,
you were the one that actually
yes.
talked about process.
Process has
And
been-
you convinced me, it's like, wow, you're right.
And North Greeley we're all on the same page, but it's well defined.
Yep.
Right, and so that also, Tom said manageable, it's the same
Mhm.
thing, go on.
well, I was just gonna say that where we are today, there's just this irony to it, which I just can't escape, which is that the big reaction against the form-based code was the demonstration of the build-out of the zoning, which appeared in the documents and was part of the analysis for the EIS. And that's what just drove people crazy. Because the perception was, the imagery said, we are essentially giving our town over to the developers. And that's not us. That's not what we want out of our town. That is what this particular project looks exactly like. To me, it's actually, if you look at the build out of the zoning, which was in the form-based code for this particular piece of property, in that document, it looks almost exactly like this project. And we have taken, just look at the project and look at the numbers of the project, and it seems to me it looks like a form-based code, what people objected to in the form-based code, which was turning the town over to the developers without sufficient input of what the public interest might be. And the interest we're talking about now is developing North Greeley and figuring out the right way to do it. This is exactly that. And we're back to where we were with the form-based code, with the consequences of a form-based code build-out on this particular piece of property, and the town board is running with it. And I thought that's what the big fuss was, that actually got rid of a whole town board or enough of a town board so that there's a new regime to come in so that wouldn't happen again. And it's happening on a smaller, in my opinion, it's happening on a smaller scale. Just look at the numbers, you don't even have to look at the imagery, just look at the numbers of the massing of zoning. The amount of development, the parking problems, or parking concerns, all of that is the form-based code. And here the town board is buying into it. I'm not buying into it, but the planning board apparently, we go to these hearings, we go to these work sessions, but I just get the feeling nobody's really listening, because the things that we brought up are not actually part of their conversation. They just never get to the point of being part of their conversation. And if you go to and it's a frustration, I think, for me personally, but that's not important. I think it should be a frustration for the planning board. And it's just a bad signal with respect to the relationship between the boards and the town government, how these things should work, but it's just not happening. So this irony is just, it's galling somehow. That's a personal, emotional feeling that I shouldn't bring to this meeting. But if this is our last chance to say something about it, I think that we need to take it on and say something. I don't know, I don't think I need to say everything I said before all over again, but because I don't think that's gonna do any good, and they've already heard it. I don't think they've listened to it, but they've heard it. But I do have a particular thing that part of this document, which I don't think has really been given a hard look. And I would like to put into the record somewhere what the elements of a hard look would be, the criteria of a hard look would be, that has not been pursued. in that particular element. And I'd like it to go in the context of a planning board document to them. But if it can't go that way, then I'll just send it myself.
I'm comfortable with that if it can go that way. The question is, what are the logistics for that? So let's figure that out. I think, like I said, I think there's an obligation for us to look at the environmental document and decide to what extent we wanna make a comment. And if you think, Tom, that the hard look hasn't been taken, the proper process hasn't been followed, that we owe it. I mean, there's a reason we're on the planning board, is that we have some level of experience and expertise, and so I completely am supportive of that. I will say that perhaps ironically or not, that I do think the process-wise, the form-based code did follow the right process, because it was a planning, there was a planning process, there was a zoning, and it wasn't project specific. Process-wise, I absolutely support that process. This one, obviously, we've all been on the same page as to how the process doesn't make all the sense here. So maybe we also use the opportunity on the comment on the environmental draft neg deck document to make sort of a one last policy comments, which are related, right? They're
They're all related.
They're not
Yeah,
unrelated,
they're all interrelated.
right?
That's right.
So
Well, I don't know about the form-based code, but the supreme irony that continues to hit me is, as I watch the town board and I watch them react to comments and questions from the public as to how would we stop the next application like this? And they're almost uniform. The town board members have said, oh no, it'll never happen. No.
We don't want another one of these.
We don't want that, and we're gonna come up with legislation, we're gonna figure out ways that it can't even get to the ZBA, because some people raise theories that the ZBA could get this somehow, and no, we have got discretion on this. I'm saying to myself, if it's so wonderful, why are you putting the red light out on another one? If it's so wonderful, why couldn't we duplicate it across the street or down the street or whatever it might be? It is, talk about irony. That's the one that gets me. Watching
conversely,
people.
opening themselves up to litigation for the neighbor next door who has the same request.
This is what
and is
people are saying.
denied arbitrarily, is the same
And apparently there's case law saying they have a good deal of discretion, but it's not so much what the law is, it's just the reaction, which is, oh no, this is it, you're gonna see just one, that's it. Over our dead bodies, we're not gonna see this again, and this is an exception because they got electrical heat and they're building this kind of construction.
Yeah.
And as we all know, the elements that are fantastic elements that they're proposing for this project can be imposed on a 1-story, 2-story, 3-story, 5-story, 6-story, whatever building, up to, I think they can do timber up to 13 stories now?
something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's absurd, and in my opinion, to say that that's the reason why we're doing it, and that's gonna be the reason why we can hold the fort so that no one else can do something similar. It's to watch the contortions.
Yeah.
You see these people try to say, no, it'll never happen again, and they may be absolutely correct. But why would you take that position if this is so positive for the community?
There was a meeting that where they were going over the zoning text. And there was a concern that there was an opportunity, a window, a flaw somewhere in the zoning text that would allow somebody to come in and say, okay, I get to do this too.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was quite a discussion of, and I think Ed Phillips was involved in, and with Sabrina involved in trying to figure out how do we design this text so that this cannot happen again. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, why are we building something that we never want to have happen again, instead of building something that we want to have happen again, and use this as a model for how we want to develop our town? And I honestly, somebody should stand up and say why we are doing this in the context of policy and planning and the future of the town, because I personally don't see it. As a member of this board, I don't see it, and I've got enough experience professionally to understand these things where there's something here which is just not making sense for the people of this town. Let's be sure we don't do this again. instead of let's do something that we want to showcase and do again. It's such a simple thing to do, just write the zoning for it.
Right, exactly.
Drives me crazy.
Yeah, I think more and more I look at that, I said there are some solutions here, and that's what I think could be helpful, is to say, you know, we always get accused of being, oh, you're just naysayers and this guy. No, we can do better. That's the whole point. We think we can do better. Why are we cutting ourselves off and not doing the best possible thing we can? There's no perfect, of course. Jeremy says it all the time, but I think there's a more closer to perfect than what we have, and I think it would be tremendous. It could be tremendous, and again, we're leaving the door open, and we haven't done what we said we were going to do. We started this 8 years ago, 7 years ago, when Rob put together the first group, and here we are. And so anyway, I'm looking at dates. I know this weekend is the holiday, right? Yom Kippur is the whole weekend, and Monday and Tuesday, so it's family time. Can we perhaps look at something, even if it's in the side room, say for the 27th? Is that a Wednesday?
I'm good. I'll make it good, whatever
Dick,
works.
are you okay on the 27th? Looking. Dick, would you be good for the 27th?
I believe so, thank you.
We'd have to check the availability of the conference room because I believe the ZBA is in.
We can use another room, can't we?
I need to check availability.
Okay. Well, we don't need, we
don't-
can televise, I guess, if you want to, but I mean, maybe we can always go, there's a library conference room or up at
Go
Chapel.
Chapac.
We can check on the room, we'll find a room, it's not a big deal.
Okay, so let's target that. I'll get a note out to everybody.
Is Dick in person?
Dick, will you be in person on the 27th or probably remote?
Good question.
I don't know, I mean, I could probably spare an hour in person. but-
If the conference rooms are available, we can do a Zoom in that room.
Okay, thank you.
Right, but my question is, if
Then we have the
if
three.
he's in person, then we can guarantee 3, if you guys are available, and I can try to make it, I'd like to make it.
Yep.
But I just have a hard time committing to that at this very moment.
Right, I understood. I'll send a note out so that people can
Okay,
respond.
and
to it.
obviously the Conan, I don't know if she's,
Yeah,
obviously
exactly.
I don't know if she's available.
So I'll propose that as a date. I'll
Great.
propose some alternatives.
Great.
So if we can't find the 27th, maybe, with staff and rooms, et cetera, maybe we can find something. Cause I think it would be important to,
Okay, so and we can come prepared, obviously, to that meeting with,
yes.
especially with
Yeah, and
Dick's time constraints.
yep. And also, I'll send it up to the town board and ask for an extension.
Well, we may not need one if we're on for September 27th, no?
Be tough to get it out that fast, I think, even then, but
I would ask for one anyway.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just in case.
yes,
Just noting that we need 3 days to notice a meeting.
okay.
If it's scheduled 1 week in advance, which this one sounds
Okay.
like it's going to be scheduled 1 week in advance, then it's 72 hours notice.
Okay.
Just-
Great, okay.
Okay.
How do we get a message out to see if any citizens wanna come in and
Well, it'll be noticed. It'll be noticed.
It'll be noticed and there'll be a Zoom link provided.
Alright. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on this?
No, thank you.
Okay, all set on this? Okay, good, I'll get those notes out, and our next item is an executive session advice of counsel. So we have to close down the Zoom for anyone else, I guess it's just us anyway, right now on Zoom. But if any members of the public, they have to be closed out, and then the throngs will have to leave.
Give them time to leave.
Do you want the doors closed?
We should.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should.
Session.